evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are tuning in from. We appreciate you being here and spending this evening with us. We are Backyard Buckets, brought to you by Backyard Sports, with another off-season episode of NBA Talk for y'all. We're here with Gary, who has come back to the civilized world. What's up, dude? Nice to see you.
Doing good, man. Doing good. It was interesting couple of weeks travel and hit the sunny paradise of Hawaii, and then ended up back out in the desert out in Las Vegas. But happy to be back. You guys held it down. A couple of great episodes the last 2 weeks. I'm happy to be back, man.
Nice. We see Dad is here from Virginia
Yes, he
today.
is.
What's up, man?
He is.
Glad to
He's
have
down
you
visiting.
here. So like I mentioned, we got an off-season episode of NBA Talk. As we all know, the NBA kind of hits a lull in the month of August, so we got some stuff, some recent news, and then a little talk on the in-season tournament that we were holding off on. So we kind of hit a lull, and we decided to bring it up tonight, give you give you guys our thoughts, kind of what we think about it, how we expect it to play out, and whether or not it really matters or not, really in the grand scheme of things. We're gonna kick this off though, talking about none other than James Harden. Yeah, so you may be thinking to yourself, what are the similarities between regular folks such as ourselves and professional athletes? And you watch these games, you're like, oh man, he's a superstar. I could never be like that guy. But this is kind of what brought Steph Curry into the forefront of our minds, and thinking, hey, that guy looks like me. I could do the things that guy's doing. And when I look at James Harden, I think of Gary, because recently they both went on world tours. They both have been flying around the globe, spewing their mouths, saying crazy stuff. But unlike Gary, James Harden has most recently called his employer a liar. We all know James Harden from his time in Houston, mostly, where we learned to love his game as a very heliocentric guy, and that's kind of where his relationship with Daryl Morey started, right? Daryl Morey has been a writer for James Harden for years, playing on reputation. Not sure. That's very true.
That's a big reason why we've got all this going on right now.
Absolutely, 100%. James Harden has requested teams from 3 different trades in, I believe, less than 2 years calendar time, maybe 3 years, with a layover in Brooklyn. But like I said, most recently he's called Daryl Morey a liar. They've historically been very close. Daryl Morey's always been a fan of his game, and he's kind of constructed teams around James Harden the way that James Harden wanted it to work, such as the Chris Paul trade, the Russell Westbrook trade, trading Ben Simmons for James Harden out of Brooklyn. Gary, I'm going to ask you here, just give me your initial thoughts on what you think of James Harden, yet again, asking for a trade.
Yeah, I'm going to quote the late, great Denny Green, and I'm going to say he is who we thought he is.
Mm-hmm.
This is what he does. This is who he is, and this is how he acts. It's always been this way. The whole shtick with the fat suit, wanting out of OKC as well. I know that publicly, right, Sam Presti and the Thunder were very diplomatic with James Harden when they ended up, deciding that of the 3, he was the odd man out, right? But behind the scenes, we've heard inklings, especially when he was first in Houston, we heard inklings that he was kind of a dickhead, right? Behind the scenes, he was hard to deal with, very much a diva, and it was hard to really put your thumb on it at the time because he was so quiet in Oklahoma City, mostly because he was kind of the third wheel on a really superstar heavy roster, right? With with Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook, who they were at the time. It was really easy for Harden to kind of get lost in the shuffle of the public eye, right? But he was the superstar in Houston, and rightfully so. He was the center of attention there because, I mean, the guy was a machine, right?
Yeah.
30 a game, triple doubles, and yada 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 on down the line. He carried some mediocre Houston rosters to some decent playoff runs. One of which, if Chris Paul hadn't gotten hurt, they might have made the finals that year and potentially could have won a title because that Golden State Warriors team went on to win the title. But this is something we've seen. It's old. It's played out. He did it in Houston with the fat suit. He did it in Brooklyn when he wasn't happy there. He demanded out. And, Daryl Morey authored that trade it was sort of a win-win, right? Everybody kind of thought at the time it was a win-win. Philly's getting rid of a guy they can't stand who was sort of in the same boat as Harden was in Brooklyn, unhappy, not really playing up the potential, not really putting in effort on a daily basis. Harden goes to Philly, seems pretty rejuvenated, plays pretty well alongside Embiid, but I think he sees the writing on the wall that the roster he's on isn't going to win a title, right? So we see him request the trade, which he has the right to do, right? But now he's acting out. And this is the show we've seen from James Harden. This is a bit more in your face, though, right? It was a little bit surprising for him to come out and just flat out say, like, Daryl Morey is a liar. And I don't want to get too far sidetracked, but I see on social media, I forget the writer now, but there's a writer on Twitter who said disgruntled James Harden demands out and calls, Daryl Morey a liar. And then Kyrie Irving, who we've seen as a very polarizing person, comes on and says disgruntled, or is he trying to hold Daryl Morey accountable? Well, both of those things can be true, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe Daryl Morey lied or said something not in good faith during this negotiation. Harden wants to get paid. As my dad pointed out, and we agreed, he's kind of playing on reputation at this point. I don't know that he's the superstar, worthy of a huge trade or huge dollars, right? So both of those things can be true, and he can be disgruntled, but also be pissed off at his employer for good reason, right? But those two things are not mutually exclusive. So we've got a player who's not happy with an organization who is trying to figure out what to do with him, right? Daryl Morey's come out and said he wants an all-star to play alongside Embiid or a bunch of draft picks that he can either flip into capital or rebuild this roster around Joel Embiid. So this is a really odd situation, and to see this the way it's played out is surprising because all indications up until about 3 months ago were that James Harden, and maybe even like 3 weeks ago, were James Harden and Daryl Morey were close, and they have been up to this point. This just goes to show, right, in the business of basketball and the business of pro sports, things can sour very, very quickly.
Yeah, for sure. Daryl Morey, whenever they made the trade from Brooklyn to Philly, Daryl Morey flew out and met James Harden on the tarmac and like walked him in arm, basically.
With his
Said,
wife,
"This is my
man.
guy."
Like you're our family, dude.
Yeah, for real. I mean, that's a guy that historically has been super close with James Harden. And a lot of that is analytics driven because James Harden was an analytics darling for years and years and years. I mean, he borderline led the charge in analytics in the modern game of basketball as we've seen it, right?
Yep.
So you mentioned an interesting point there, I think, is you said that he saw the writing on the wall in that this roster in Philly could not win a title. I would like to push back a little bit on that. They were very successful with Harden, right? Embiid won an MVP. Why can't they just run that back and be successful again? I mean, do we think that Boston is going to be better? We just learned that Porzingis, has plantar fasciitis, right? So who knows what his status is going to be in May next year. That's not like an injury that just kind of goes away, especially for a big man. Milwaukee is another year older, right? I But the lying part aside, whatever they promised James Harden that they clearly have not delivered on, put that to the side for the time being. Are you
Your delivery?
nice? Are you sure that Philadelphia can't be successful with the roster they have currently constructed if James Harden comes back?
I think that he's not sure, and maybe I'm reading too much into it, right? Maybe he just isn't happy there. I don't know. Looking at it from the perspective of a player who's been kind of pampered, right? In both situations that he's been in with Daryl Morey, and requesting a trade on the back of another disappointing exit in the playoffs. That's just what it feels like to me. Is
Right.
He feels like this roster, as currently constituted and looking at the offseason moves that they made or didn't make, right? It just feels like he's a guy who's looking for that place that he thinks he can win, right? And the fact that he requested the trade to the Clippers, who for 3-4 years now, we've said, like, health aside, if they stayed healthy, that's a team that can make a run, right? Because they've got maybe the greatest playoff performer or one of the greatest playoff performers of all time in Kawhi, one of the best two-way players in Kawhi, one of the other best two-way players in Paul George. You add a guy like Harden who can fill up the cup, maybe that's a team that you think could make a run, right? Or maybe he just wants to go play with friends, because we know he's really good friends with Paul George. Yeah. So maybe that's what it is too. So I could be putting words in his mouth that aren't there. Certainly, you make a fair point. But the reason I say that is because I see what happened with Philly, and he looks at maybe I'm biased,
right,
in my assessment of Embiid and his health and how he's never going to be there when it matters in crunch, because it's historically been the case. Maybe I'm reading too much into that as well. Some of my bias might be showing, but I just think on the back of a disappointing exit in the playoffs, him requesting a trade feels like he thinks it can't be done in Philly. Maybe it is just about the money, though. It could be just about the money.
Right. So let me play devil's advocate here for a second, right? What has Embiid been the most vocal about the last 3 years, right? His MVP.
I was going to say, wanted to win MVP.
Wanted to win MVP. We all. It's no secret to anyone that Embiid wanted to win MVP. He felt like he deserved it.
Yep.
Yeah. Even going back to Giannis's the year before Jokic won it, right?
Right.
That he was the kind of the media darling. He's everything that Jokic should be, in terms of superstar status, social media presence, and all this stuff. But he's everything that Jokic doesn't want to be at the same time, right? So he's got his MVP now.
Yep.
Who's to say that going into this year, maybe his head coach, who tends to play players really long minutes, but who's to say that going into this year, Embiid doesn't take his health and his load management a little more seriously, right? And he sits down with James Harden and he goes, hey, man, like, money be damned, sign a 1-year deal. Let's go win a chip. I'm going to sit out 35 games. I'll be good to go in the playoffs. Let's run this thing back. It wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility for that to happen in my mind. Like, I could totally see Embiid being like, I got my MVP. Everybody knows I'm, one of the best, if not the best in the league at what I do. Now it's time to win. And it really is time for Embiid to win, because he's not young anymore.
It is.
And his body does not treat him well in long stretches of games. That being said, I think that things in Philly may be different if Harden's stat lines don't go down the last 3 games of their season the way that it did. Like, if he just doesn't go worse in 5, 6, 7. But it did happen, there's nobody to know for sure. We're just speaking hypothetically here. But I for one, I've been very critical of James Harden, right, over the years for his antics. You mentioned the fat suit, basically eating his way out of Houston. I do give him a little credit for playing in the playoffs with his hamstring being as messed up as it was when he was in Brooklyn, basically by himself.
He's been an enigma, hasn't he?
Yes. He's a very strange career.
At times you're like, man, that dude is a warrior. That dude just wants to win.
Mm-hmm.
And then he throws on a fat suit and sneaks his way out of Houston. And then now he calls his GM, who's literally called him better than Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
Calls him a liar. Like, come on, man. And I've been hypercritical of Harden as well because of his antics, because of some of the way he plays the game. I think at times he can be a bit of a dirty player, a little bit like a Chris Paul. He kind of sneaks contact in on people when they're in prone positions, either in the air or, those sorts of things. I see that a lot from him trying to draw fouls. Like, that's neither here nor there in terms of what they're trying to get from it. But I look at this and I say, it feels so grimy for him to come out and say these things about Daryl Morey. But back to your original point, yeah, and you make great points, right? Milwaukee's a year older, right? And they're basically just running it back with the addition of, one or two kind of pieces, right, in free agency that maybe give them some toughness and maybe some shot making, but you can't say that they're demonstrably better, right? And they're a year older. And Boston, everybody, this whole offseason hinged on Kristaps Porzingis being healthy in May, right? Nobody gives a fuck about his health in October, November, December, all the way through until we get to the end of the regular season. They traded for him to be a difference maker in May. And if he's not, then yeah, Boston's very gettable. Without Marcus Smart giving them some of that junkyard toughness and leadership that he brings to the table, they made in Al Horford is a shell of his former self, right? Kristaps Porzingis in May is what Boston made that trade for. They're very gettable. And then 100%. You look at the rest of the Eastern Conference, right? There aren't any teams that I look at and say Philly can't beat them in a 7-game series. You've got Cleveland, right? I'll give Cleveland their due that they're probably next in line. But if you put a healthy James Harden and a healthy Joel Embiid against that Cleveland roster, all things even, I do think that Philly's probably slightly a better team. They probably win in 6 or 7, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, if I'm Joel Embiid, I probably want to say, hey James, man, let's strap these shoes up and let's make this run, because now all I've got left is to win a championship, right? We always talk about legacy. It's always about legacy, especially with superstars in any league. The only thing left off of his resume, and we talked about it with Jokic last year when they were getting ready to make their run, the only thing left on Joel Embiid's resume is to win a championship. And you have to think that the Eastern Conference is gettable, right? Yeah. If Kristaps is going to be balky like he has been his whole career in terms of injuries, Milwaukee's probably the team you're looking at and saying that's the one we've got to get by. And Philly's already shown they can play Milwaukee tough in the playoffs. So
yeah,
I think you're absolutely right? That the smart play here, if they could get on the same page, smart play might be to say, okay, let's get motivated and let's chew on this thing, because it's the only thing left on both resumes, really. Yep. Not just we talk about Embiid a lot, but he's the one that's been in the news lately about the MVP race. But like, what's left on Harden's resume? Win a title,
championship. Right? Yep. And all criticism aside, because I do believe that it's fair for his antics and his off court, demands and whatnot. I do have to be slightly sympathetic to the fact that it does appear that he was promised one thing last year. They said, hey, opt in, take this pay cut. Next offseason, we got you.
Yeah.
And then all signs kind of point to them reneging on whatever they promised him, right? Yep. So demands aside, criticism aside, I do have to sympathize, and it's tough to do when, you've made $200 million in your career. But I do sympathize to the human side of him saying, hey, I was promised one thing and you guys turned around and are telling me something totally different. And that's why I'm going to go on this shitstorm media spin and kind of, throw my GM and my former friend under the bus.
Yep.
So I'm not saying he's going about it the right way, but I will give him a little credit for what appears to be a situation that he was misled in.
Yeah, for sure. And in the devil's advocate vein, right? Like, who's to tell him the right way to do it, right?
Yeah.
If this is the way he feels he needs to go about it, it may look strange, right? And it may feel weird and feel kind of grimy or whatever, but like, we don't know exactly what conversations went on behind closed doors, right? If Philly promised him something, sure, right? Yeah. He is a liar. Yeah. Right? If Morey especially was the one that laid the promise out there for him, sure. Yeah. And it's not my whatever number of millions of dollars that James Harden's losing out on now. It's his money, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, what it boils down to is he feels like he's going about it the right way. It's fun, right? From a coverage perspective, and I get to hear and read and see all these memes and all this. What blows my mind is this Pizza Fridays thing. It's so funny that like how petty we as human beings can get, right? I guess there was some sort of promise made about pizza every Friday and this sort of thing, and he went and like was bitching about it to a colleague, and that kind of leaked out into the into the news. It is wild. Like when we're trying to make a point, sometimes we human beings can be super petty about shit like pizza.
Yep.
For an NBA player. Like I get right, it's a promise that was made, sure, but like
that's
something I would bitch about like at my employer because I don't make $50 million a year, right? You promised me pizza Friday. Now I'm eating fucking hot dogs or whatever, right?
Yeah. I thought you were right in that ballpark area.
Yeah, I see.
All right. Well, we all feel bad for James Harden. Go cry on your stacks of money, dude.
Right.
But do whatever you're gonna do and make it entertaining for us.
McDuck GIF where he's wiping his eyes with money.
Yep. and we appreciate the content, brother, even if it was all the way from China.
Absolutely.
All right, we're gonna shift gears here a little bit and talk about something that is going to occur on the court, and it's something that nobody's ever seen before, and that is a basketball tournament where there will be brackets. And you can make selections, and then there's going to be I hesitate to say a Final Four. I think I may be coming up with that on my own for the first time ever, but there will be a final foursome of teams that gets together in Vegas. Not March Madness. Sorry, excuse me, not March Madness. This is the NBA in-season tournament that will be occurring for the first time ever this year. They're broken down into 3 regions per conference, East and West. Every team will be playing. The games will be televised, and like I said, the Final Four grouping will take place in Vegas. I think the first week of December.
Yeah, I feel like there's a trademark out there already for.
I just came up with that on my own, man. Final Four trademark Bentley Danger. So Gary, are you excited? How do you feel about this? What are we thinking?
I'm a little up, little down, right? I'm a little up because I think that this is a good indication that the NBA is not going to rest on their laurels, right? We've seen the NFL has gained so much popularity because offense, right? Offense is up, it moves the needle and sells tickets, and the NFL's popularity is like through the roof since the mid 90s when they really started to take off, right? And we've seen recently the NHL with the All-Star game, they've made that interesting, and the NHL playoffs are always exciting. And then there's MLB, right? MLB is probably the most recent example of a league that's seen, the indications from their fan base that, okay, the game might be getting a little stale. And they took a hard hit in terms of popularity over the last probably decade, right? As the NFL and the NBA have been going up, the MLB has had an inverse relationship with them. And this year, the MLB made big changes to change the way the game's played, the pace of the game, and it's paid off. So I'll give you some numbers. They had 5 consecutive weekends from this past weekend going backwards where they've had over 1.5 million in terms of attendance at stadiums. That hasn't happened since the 90s, back when baseball was really kind of in its prime, right before the swoon of the mid 90s, and then 98 kind of brought it back up. But that hasn't happened in a long time, right? And games are now 20% shorter, and it isn't just about the length of the game. There's a lot more action. I went to opening day this year, and I had a lot of like traditionalist baseball guys that I talked the game who were like, yeah, how about this pitch clock? And they expected me to kind of be on the whole get off my lawn thing. And I was like, nope, it's fucking fantastic. I kid you not. I was at the game, and like it was so exciting. It was so much action. The pitches are being thrown, and you get the action, and the base changes too. Guys are stealing bases more frequently. The offense is going to go up, but also the pace of the game. It's not about the length. It's about the pace. The NBA has figured out the pace, right? So the NBA has looked at that and said, we're not going to do what the MLB did and get ourselves in a situation where we have to change the game. we're going to stay in front of it. And they're doing these innovative things. The virtual seating during COVID was especially a big hit, and they've kept that going to a certain extent. Really getting fan interaction, but also getting into international markets, right? We know about China, we know about Europe, etc. Now they're looking at it probably, right, behind closed doors. If I had to guess, they're looking at it and saying, what can we do to counteract some of the quote unquote, the regular season doesn't matter, right? Because we've heard that from a lot of superstars that say it. We're talking about load management. We're talking about, guys just playing sitting out and resting at the ends of seasons. Tanking makes the game a little bit hard to watch when you got a lot of really bad teams as well in the, suck for Vic sweepstakes. So the NBA looks at it and says, what are they doing in Europe, right? It's soccer. They've got in-season tournaments, league cups that they play, and they're super exciting. Now, I'm not here to tell you this is going to be that, right? And that's why I say I'm a little bit down as well. So I'm up because I love that the NBA is trying to stay ahead of the curve, keep the game exciting, keep fans engaged, maybe counteract some of that whole negativity about the regular season. But there's not enough at stake, right? Soccer, that's a city thing, the hooligans and all that. Everybody gets behind their city. There's so much pride in it that the League Cup is bragging rights, and it matters. It matters inherently. There's also really big money behind some of those League Cups, especially you look at Premier League and some of the bigger leagues. There's real good money behind that for the teams to go out and then in turn pay players. This feels good as an effort piece, but I'm a little down on it because it doesn't mean enough, and it really – like you get a trophy, you get a little bit of money, but it amounts to I think it ends up being like $125,000 per player on the roster. Those guys on the end of the roster are going to appreciate it, but I don't know how much this is going to change superstars with their load management and how much they're actually going to play in it. The NBA is going to have to take some steps, I think, and improve upon this, but I love it as a foundational piece for something that creates some intrigue in the regular season. And I'll save some of my thoughts on kind of what I'd like to see going forward, because I think we're going to have a little exchange on that. But curious to hear your thoughts on it as well.
Yeah. So you said you were up and down, right? I'm going to borrow a line from one of the great poets of our time, Sir Fat Joe, and say I'm all the way up.
Love it.
You made a lot of really good points. Especially in that the game can be tough to watch going down the stretch of the season when these guys are just playing nobodies on the end of the bench, G League call-up guys, whatever, right? I don't think that this in-season tournament is going to spark a competitive nature in the superstars of our game, but I think it will spark a greater competitive nature just due to probably getting more minutes to the guys that are at the end of these NBA benches, right? It's going to be guys, but potentially, this is all potential. I don't know for sure how exactly it's going to play out, but in my mind, this is how it's going to work, right? Our superstars are still going to load manage. They're not going to care because the money, $500,000 for the winning team. What do they care? They're making $40 million a year, right? Totally fine by me. You don't have to play. As long as you show up in the playoffs, I'm good with that. But I'm excited to see these guys that are worthy of being on NBA rosters have a burning competitive edge or burning competitive fire. They're playing with a chip on their shoulder, and they want to prove to their coaches in real NBA games and not just Summer League, which we all love to watch, not just G League games, not just end of the season games that don't matter because nobody's actually trying. But these are real regular season games that do affect your season standings at the end of the year. And again, hypothetically, what I assume is going to happen is they're going to play guys that we don't normally see get big minutes in rotations during regular season games. And everyone's going to be healthy, too. It's going to be in November and the first week of December, right? So that's kind of going to be what I think the NBA is trying to do here is get more eyes on the product before December 25th, right? Christmas Day, that's kind of the unofficial start of the –
feels like it starts, right?
Exactly. It's the unofficial start of the NBA season. Everybody kind of knows that. We all watch opening night, and then we sink back into football, and then we get college basketball. You get feast week, you get all the Big Ten, ACC, whatever. Everybody's watching college basketball. And then Christmas Day, it's like, boom, NBA, we're locked in, we're ready to go. So what the NBA is trying to do, in my opinion, is to get eyes on the product during the heart of football season, as well as showcase some of their younger talent, some of the guys you may not know but you could hypothetically fall in love with, right? You'd be like, oh, if it was 15 years ago, you'd be like, oh my God, Danny Green. Like, I remember him from North Carolina. This dude can shoot the hell out of the ball. What is he not doing playing? And then, 4 or 5 years later, he's in the NBA Finals. And you're like, oh, I remember when he won in-season tournament MVP. This guy is, like, I've liked him for all this time. He's really, really good, right? So ultimately, it's a money play by the NBA. We all kind of understand that, right? But it's going to be encouraging from a spectator's perspective, I believe, because we're going to see guys that are NBA talent, they're NBA players, but we may not know them as well as the superstars, and they're going to make names for themselves in this in-season tournament. It's going to be, it's regionally based, but then it's going to Vegas, and it's going to be a whole big ordeal, and I'm praying that they don't play it on Thursdays, Saturdays, Sundays, or Mondays, because those nights are kind of booked up for me, but I will be watching regardless. I am blessed enough to have multiple screens in my house, and I will find a way to put at least an eye on this tournament. And I think it's going to be very fun. It was very strategic of the NBA, I think, to introduce this before they renegotiate their TV rights media deal.
Yep.
So that they can be like, oh,
more meaningful games.
Exactly. Exactly. We got to the Celtics.
Here's your 10% premium.
Exactly. They have to pay Jaylen Brown all that money somehow, and it's right from this in-season tournament money. So that's kind of my take on it. I appreciate what they're doing and trying to create more meaningful games. I like that you compared it to the soccer leagues in Europe. I do think it bears a similar resemblance. Obviously, we don't have relegation. Although with the two new teams coming in, shattering news here, there's going to be two new NBA teams within probably the next 5 years.
Yep.
I'm not saying that relegation is going to happen. I would never say that relegation is going to happen. But if they move to some system like that, it wouldn't surprise me, just because there's been a lot of changes in sports in the last decade. And if they were willing to try something like that, I wouldn't be shocked. Adam Silver is kind of a forward-thinking guy. Yep. Duke alum, not a big deal, casual, whatever. Just kind of throw that one out there. But it's exciting to see them bring changes to the league without actually changing the sport itself. Still keeping the integrity of basketball the way that it kind of has grown and molded on its own over the years.
Yeah, I agree, right? You're not changing the regular season. This isn't a 2 or 3 week hiatus from the regular season, and we're just going to kick the can left and right in terms of length of the season, which is probably what the NFL would do, because they just want to dominate the entire 12-month calendar, right? As we've seen them kind of move where the combine goes, then move where the draft goes, then move where free agency starts. You almost don't know when the league year ends and the new league year begins in the NFL. The NBA has said, we're not going to change the product that you've got. We're going to try to improve the product, right?
Yeah.
And I love it. You're 100% right that Adam Silver has been, from the get-go, has been a forward thinker, even more so than David Stern was. And David Stern was pretty goddamn good as a commissioner in terms of growing the game of basketball.
Yeah.
May have been a little bit of a curmudgeon about, AI's dress code, but
but it gave us Dwayne Wade.
He gave us Dwayne Wade. Yeah. But Adam Silver's done a great job. I look at it and I think that, I think there's ways that they could make this thing even better. I love it as a concept, love it as a foundational concept. I know you can't necessarily say we've got a polished, finished product right off the bat when you're introducing something new. So I get it. I anticipate this thing to evolve. I don't know how it's going to evolve, but I would like to see it evolve into having a bit more meaning, right? And you and I were kind of talking a little bit before the show, showing our cards a little bit in terms of what we thought about it. But I'd love to see it have some sort of bearing on a couple of things, right? Is it the playoffs in some form or fashion? Is it the draft, right? And I look at it and say, if you finish in the bottom 5 of the NBA regular season, but you competed your ass off in this tournament, and maybe you finished maybe you made it to the final. I don't want to say final 4. Sorry, I don't want to fringe on
the last.
But if you made it to the semifinals, right? If you made it that far, right, you get a bump in your odds in the lottery or something along those lines, right?
Yeah.
And then you brought up a really good point about the playoffs potentially if you win it, and I'll push it your way for that. But I just think we're gonna evolve this thing, and it's gonna become more than just this, because it does feel like great concept. It feels a little hollow. It feels like this is kind of dipping maybe our toes in the water, which is smart in my opinion. You don't want to throw an entire product at the wall and say this is what we've got and this is how it's going to be, because you got to kind of feel this thing out.
Yeah, for sure. I agree that it's a good thing to dip your toe. People don't like admitting defeat, but if it doesn't work, I feel like Adam Silver's not the guy to be like, okay, it didn't work, we just won't do it. I don't imagine that will be the case. I would assume that this will probably be a thing to stick around. But what you were kind of hinting at there was giving it some sort of lasting meaning for the rest of, or for the remainder of the season, rather. And I posed to you before we started recording that I would kind of like to see it go the Major League Baseball route, and the winner of this in-season tournament, whatever conference they come from, gets to host the NBA Finals. You'd probably have to figure some sort of compensation out for the team that actually won the best record overall in the NBA, because it diminishes that a little bit. But that does incentivize your superstar-laden teams, the teams that can actually think they can compete for a title that year, to play hard in this tournament and win it for the conference, right? So that it does have that impact on the playoffs down the line. The next June, whenever the team that hopefully wins for that conference thinks that they're going to be playing in the NBA Finals.
Yeah, because I think as much as any sport, home court advantage matters in the NBA, right? We see in other sports a lot of times, hockey especially, like home ice doesn't always matter, right? We've seen 8 seeds upset 1 seeds, and in the NFL, we've seen wild card teams get hot and make a run through the playoffs. So home field there, sometimes you feel like it matters in places maybe like Arrowhead or Seattle, right? But it doesn't always matter. But it feels like in the NBA that home court really does matter. And maybe that's a way, right? You talked about guys on the end of the bench. You're going to get a lot of run in this tournament. Maybe that's the way that a guy like LeBron James, right? He's kind of the biggest right now in terms of he's nearing the end of his career, and load management is becoming a big part of his, every regular season. Maybe that's how you incentivize some of these guys to play. And then, right, you're talking about that TV deal. That becomes even more, right? These are meaningful games that you're going to have superstars in, right? Yep. So that even more so with the CBA is just another bargaining chip to get more money. And where does that money go? To the owners, but also to the players, right? Cap goes up,
yep.
All that stuff. So I think that's a brilliant idea potentially to have home court maybe right on that. Maybe something to do with, the draft lottery, something along those lines. Some sort of compensation that isn't just here's a trophy, right? Because trophies are great, but the one that matters is the one you win in May, right?
Yeah.
So
I did really like your suggestion of if you finish bottom 5 in the league, or it may have to be bottom 4. But if you finish bottom 4 in the league, but you finish top 4 in the tournament, you get, like a 2% odd increase. Right. Because they've done away with the envelopes and ping pong balls. It's all computerized now.
Yeah.
But I like that idea.
I wouldn't hate, honestly, if it was lottery teams, right? If you just said if you finished in the lottery, but you played your ass off and finished in the, final or last 4 of, the tournament, then you get, is it 2%? Is it even 1%, or is it something bigger, right? Is it 3, 4, 5%? You really start to incentivize those teams to try during this tournament. So, and I think that just drives up the competitiveness. It's not just necessarily getting the superstars on the court, but it's making these games more competitive. And you've got even more to say these are meaningful games in terms of that TV deal, that negotiating deal. So
for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. I did mention it's an off-season program. NBA news is a little slow. That's all right. We keep chugging along. We have one more segment coming in for the rest of the evening here. We are going to speak about a player that I'm not sure everyone here is familiar with, and that's okay because you will be soon enough. I can promise you that. This man goes by the name of Cooper Flagg. Yes, Cooper Flagg is a stud superstar basketball player from the state of Maine, which does not happen very often. He is 16 years old. He's going into I guess now will be his senior year.
Yeah.
Long story short, he is reclassified from the class of 2025 to be eligible to go to college to the class of 2024 to be eligible to go to college, which is important because the Boozer twins are also in that class. And very recently, Cooper Flagg and the Boozer twins took a campus visit to one Duke University in Durham, North Carolina. Now, the coincidental timing of this, just very coincidentally, was that no less than 24 hours after finishing his campus visit in Durham, North Carolina, Cooper Flagg decided, maybe I should reclassify so I can come here next spring and play ball with these Boozer boys. Now, there are rumors on the street that say the Boozer boys are not going to Duke, which is unfortunate, but never say never, right?
Yeah.
The odds-on favorite right now, I believe, for Cooper Flagg to go to college is to go to Duke, which is not super shocking if you know the history of Duke and their ethnicity of recruits. And not to say anything derogatory about it, but they have a type, right? Cooper Flagg is the best player in the country. If he were to stay in the class of 2025, he would for sure be the number one overall draft pick. There are people that will tell you in the 2025 draft class or the 2025 NBA draft, which he will now be eligible for. There are people that say he is already the number one or will be the number one pick in that class. He's 16 years old. He's 6'8", and he's an absolute stud and has dominated the summer camp circuit this year. If you follow any type of recruiting content on Twitter, Gary, I know. Well, I've recently learned that you're a huge Melo fan, right? Melo was a super big recruit. He went to a school that's probably near and dear to your heart. I'm not saying the two are similar players, but it wouldn't shock us, right, if Cooper Flagg came in and did something similar. Do you feel differently than anything I've just stated?
I mean, other than my feelings about Duke, but no, I think you're spot on, right? And if Duke were able to land Flagg and the Boozer twins, like that's one of the all-time recruiting class coups, probably. And I think everybody feels like it's like a done deal that the Boozer twins are going to go to Duke because obviously their father went to Duke and was a legend at Duke and had a long NBA career and is all the time seen on the sidelines at Duke games. But if he remains committed to Duke, this guy feels like one of those kind of, even maybe more so than like a Vic, because he's a little more kind of in our face as Americans. Like we didn't know about Wembanyama until the average American fan, right? Didn't know about Wembanyama until really like Tank for Vic became a thing. And then you see the highlights and whatnot. But like this guy's playing on American soil. He's from an unknown state, right? In the basketball world in Maine. I think there's been like 4 people to ever touch a basketball in the state of Maine. I say that jokingly, but like just there's not a lot of big name guys that come out of Maine. This dude is unbelievable. And he's playing up in terms of competition. Any chance he gets, he's playing in, elite AAU leagues. He's playing in the USA under 18. He is, and he shows out and sticks out in those leagues against superior competition, right? And that goes a long way to say something. You're saying a lot about a 16-year-old kid, essentially. Yeah. He may not look like a kid because he's 6'9", I believe, and 195 pounds, or 6'8" and 195 pounds. May not look like a kid because he's going to tower over you, but he's still 16 years old and has a lot of like growing into his body to do. And he's already dominating essentially his basketball world, right? His peers and his environment. So big get for Duke, in my opinion. I think he has potential to be one of those meteoric freshmen like Melo was, like Kevin Durant was, like Ben Simmons was at LSU. I think he has the potential to be that guy. And if you pair him with 2 other like top 25 in the nation guys with the pedigree that the Boozer twins have, that's an unbelievable get for Duke. And I hate to say it, but that'd be a great get, and they'd have to be odds-on favorites in in a season where they would be potentially able to put all three of those folks on the same floor. It is interesting that the Boozer twins are even talking to UNC, which Kentucky, I get, right? It's another blue blood. It's John Calipari. If Coach Cal rings up your phone, you're going to take that phone call. But I would think as the son or sons of a Duke legend, when any number from the area code within Chapel Hill rings up on your phone, you're hitting ignore, right? But I guess not. In the grand scheme, everybody wants to be recruited, right?
NIL, man, it changes people.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I'm not sure if you were doing this on purpose. I'm going to choose to believe that you were not. But he is not yet committed to Duke, and I think that you were kind of trying to like jinx it a little bit. Like maybe if I throw this out there into the universe enough times, so he'll just say, "No, I'm not doing it." He'll feel the reverse energy, right? But I would like to publicly state,
I wasn't doing it on purpose.
Cooper, come to Duke, buddy. We have a spot for you. I will drive you there myself.
I will say, like you said, right? Coincidence or not, it doesn't feel like a coincidence. You visit Duke at the same time as two other highly recruited players, and 5 seconds after you walk off campus, you file your paperwork through the class of 5. It feels like he has a pretty strong affinity for Duke University. Now, I know it's not a done deal, and a year from now is a long way away, but certainly the indications point toward the fact that he really, really enjoyed his visit to the campus there in Durham. Sorry, blank there for a minute.
Yeah. The last time a white American basketball player was taken first overall in the NBA draft, do you have a guess as to what year and or who the player was?
A white American.
Yes.
Ooh. Bird didn't go 1 overall.
I'll give you a hint. Go back further.
Further than Bird? Oh my God. Maravich?
No. So I was going to say go back further before you said Bird, but it was 1977, and it was Kent Benson.
I would have never gotten there. Ryan probably would have.
Ryan would absolutely have
never gotten
there. Yes. Dr. Naismith himself would have known that. We miss you, buddy. Come back soon. Safe travels and such. 1977, Kent Benson, last white American-born player to go number 1 overall in the NBA draft. Cooper Flagg, you are probably next in line for a long time. Yeah. And we hope you choose correctly when going to college. All right, Gary. Bring your championship back to Durham, dog. We need it. It's been 2015. It's been 8 years since Duke won a title. Well, I guess we're going into year 9 now of Duke not winning a title, and your boy's thirsty for a championship.
When was the last time they went a decade without one? You don't want to get there.
The 80s probably. Yeah, we don't love that. No. But I think early preseason rankings have us number 2 overall behind Kansas.
And I mean they're already in a good spot. I was a little worried, to be honest, about the start to last season, honestly.
Yeah.
And whether or not Coach K had kind of set them up for failure and not in choosing his successor and not letting the university kind of do their due diligence. But they played better in the second half last year. And it's clear that, Shire's kind of figuring out this recruiting thing. And,
for sure.
You keep bringing in them classes. Duke recruits itself. You just got to not fuck it up, right?
Just can't let them leave.
Yeah.
Just can't let them leave. You're here now, buddy.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, Gary, any closing thoughts? Any good news for the people? Any, football soon? Give us something to think about till next week.
Yeah, for sure. Football's right around the corner. We've kind of got this stale period for the NBA. We're going to do our best to fill this up with as much cool and interesting content as we can in the off season. But, before you know it, we're going to get into NFL season and college football season, and the weeks are going to tick off. And next thing you know, we're going to be tipping off And then, as you said, right, Christmas is right around the corner from that point, and that's really when the NBA season gets into full gear. But the NBA has kind of thrown us a curveball this year. We got this tournament to look forward to in October, November, and hopefully it's as exciting as the NBA would like it to be because of a lot of things, right? We want to keep the fans' attention, but also CBA is right around the corner, or TV deals right around the corner. So
Yes. CBA, I think, has I think it's
yeah,
like 9
they
years.
just renegotiated a
Yeah.
pretty solid CBA too. So I
Yeah.
don't think we're going to see any issues from the players. So they've got a strong union in the NBA, man. You can't say that about every league. The NBA's got a really strong union.
Yeah, shout out CJ McCollum.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, like Gary said, football right around the corner. We check out the other feeds for some football content if your heart so desires. Please. I get lonely during football season. I need people to talk to. So for Gary and myself and Ryan, who is out there, you all have a wonderful week. We will see you here next week. Same bet time, same bet channel. Y'all have a wonderful evening.